In
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಸರ್.
ನಮಸ್ತೆ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಬಂತಲ್ಲ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಬಂತಲ್ಲ. ಇದೆ ಅವ್ರು ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದು. ಅವ್ರು ಮಾಡಿ ಬರ್ತಾರ. ಅವ್ರೆ ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಹಲೋ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಸುದೇಶ್ನ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಹಲೋ ಹಲೋ. ಮೇಡಮ್ ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀರಿ, ಇದು ಮಾಡ್ರಿ. ಹೌದಲ್ರಿ, ಅದನ್ನೇ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ.
ಎಸ್ ಸರ್.
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ.
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆನಾ?
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಮೇಡಮ್. ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಮೇಡಮ್?
ಸರ್ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಶೇರ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಸರ್?
ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಮೇಡಮ್, ಶೇರ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ.
ಓಕೆ
ಓಕೆ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಿಡಿ, ನಂದೇನು ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣ. ಗಂಟೆ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ಲ ಮೇಡಮ್, ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣ.
ಎಸ್ ಸರ್. ನಮಸ್ತೆ ಸರ್.
ನಮಸ್ತೆ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಯಾರು ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾರೇನಾ? ಸೂಚನೆ ಕೊಡು, ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕು, ಎಲ್ಲ ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಮೇಡಮ್ ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣ.
ಎಸ್ ಸರ್.
ಕನ್ನಡ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ವಿಭಾಗದ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಆನ್ಲೈನ್ ಸರಣಿ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳನ್ನ 4ನೇ ದಿನದ ಈ ದಿನ ಆಚರಣೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ, ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಈ ದಿನದ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸವನ್ನ ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಡೋದಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ಕೇಂದ್ರದ ಪ್ರಾಧ್ಯಾಪಕರಾದ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಸುದೇಶ್ನ ಮುಖರ್ಜಿ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅವರು ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಡ್ಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರನ್ನ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಮೊದಲು ಹೃತ್ಪೂರ್ವಕವಾಗಿ ಸ್ವಾಗತವನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ಕನ್ನಡ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಕುಲಪತಿಗಳಾದ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಡಿ.ವಿ. ಪರಮಶಿವಮೂರ್ತಿ ಅವರು ಈ ನಮ್ಮ ಸರಣಿ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸದ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಚಾಲನೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ಸುದೀರ್ಘವಾಗಿ ನಿರಂತರವಾಗಿ ನಡೆದುಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಹಾಯ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಕಾರಣಗಳಿಗಾಗಿ ಮತ್ತು ಕನ್ನಡ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ತರದ ಅಕಾಡೆಮಿಕ್ ಆನ್ಲೈನ್ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸಗಳನ್ನ ನಡೆಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸತ್ಪ್ರೇರಣೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಚಾಲನೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ನಮಗೆ ಬೆಂಗಾವಲಾಗಿ ನಿಂತಿರುವ ಕಾರಣಗಳಿಗಾಗಿ ವಿಭಾಗದ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಮತ್ತು ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ಕೇಂದ್ರದ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಕೇಳುಗರ ಎಲ್ಲರ ವತಿಯಿಂದನೂ ಕೂಡ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಕುಲಪತಿಗಳಾದ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಡಿ.ವಿ. ಪರಮಶಿವಮೂರ್ತಿ ಅವರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೃತ್ಪೂರ್ವಕವಾದ ಸ್ವಾಗತವನ್ನು ಕೋರ್ತೇನೆ. ಅವರು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷತೆ ವಹಿಸಿಕೊಂಡು ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಾನು ಕೂಡ ನಾನು ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನೆನಪಿಸ್ತಾ, ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಈ ದಿನದ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸದ ವಿಷಯ ವಸಾಹತೋತ್ತರ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳು. ವಸಾಹತೋತ್ತರ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಕುರಿತು ವಸಾಹತೋತ್ತರ ಸ್ತ್ರೀವಾದದ ನಂತರದಲ್ಲಿ ಅನೇಕ ಚರ್ಚೆಗಳು ಅಂತಾರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಳೆದು ಬಂದಿರುವ ಈ ಅನೇಕ ಚಿಂತನೆ ಧಾರೆಗಳು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಭಾಷೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಡಿಸ್ಕೋರ್ಸ್ ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಂಶೋಧನೆ ಕೈಗೊಂಡಿರುವ ಅಥವಾ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನದ ಆಸಕ್ತಿಯನ್ನು ಹೊಂದಿರತಕ್ಕಂತ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಂಶೋಧಕರಿಗೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಆಸಕ್ತರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿವಸ ವಸಾಹತೋತ್ತರ ಕಾಲಘಟ್ಟದ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳು ಒಂದು ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅನನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಮತ್ತು ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಗಮನಿಸಲೇಬೇಕಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಮುಖಾಮುಖಿಗೆ ಅಥವಾ ಸಾಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಕ ಮುಖಾಮುಖಿಗೆ ಎದುರುಗೊಳ್ಳೋದಿಕ್ಕೆ ವಸಾಹತೋತ್ತರ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳ ಅಗತ್ಯತೆ ಇದೆ. ಈ ವಸಾಹತೋತ್ತರ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳ ಮೂಲಕ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಾಂಪ್ರದಾಯಿಕ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳನ್ನ, ಸಾಂಪ್ರದಾಯಿಕ ದೃಷ್ಟಿ ಧೋರಣೆಗಳನ್ನ ಹೊಡೆದು ಹಾಕಿ ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ಹೇಗೆ ನಾವು ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ, ಪ್ರಸ್ತುತ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗೆ ಅಳವಡಿಸ್ಕೋಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ ಅನ್ನುವ ಅಂಶ ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿದೆ. ಹೀಗಾಗಿ ಬೇರೆಲ್ಲ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಶಿಸ್ತುಗಳು ಕೂಡ, ನಾಟ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ವುಮೆನ್ ಸ್ಟಡೀಸ್, ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಶಿಸ್ತುಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಎಷ್ಟು ಜಾರಿ ಇವೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಶಿಸ್ತುಗಳಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ವಸಾಹತೋತ್ತರ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳ ಅಗತ್ಯತೆ ಇದ್ದೇ ಇದೆ. ನಾನು ನಿನ್ನೆ ದಿವಸನೂ ಕೂಡ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ, ಈ ಸ್ತ್ರೀವಾದಿ ಚಿಂತನೆ, ಸ್ತ್ರೀವಾದಿ ಸಂಶೋಧನೆ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿವಸ ಸಾಂಪ್ರದಾಯಿಕ ಎಲ್ಲ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಶಿಸ್ತುಗಳಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಅಗತ್ಯ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಗಮನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಎಲ್ಲ ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ರೆಲಿವೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಪ್ರಸ್ತುತವಾಗಿ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿವಸ ಆಲೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೊರಟ್ರೆ ಮೊದಲು ನಮಗೆ ಎದುರಾಗೋದು ಈ ತರ ವಸಾಹತೋತ್ತರವಾದ ಸಮಕಾಲೀನ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳು. ಸಮಕಾಲೀನ ಈ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾತ್ರ ನಾವು ಗಮನಿಸಿದಾಗ ಮಾತ್ರ ನಮ್ಮ ಹೊಸ ನೋಟಗಳು, ಹೊಸ ಒಳನೋಟಗಳು, ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಬಲವಾಗ್ತವೆ ಮತ್ತು ಸರಿಯಾದ ದಿಕ್ಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಆಲೋಚನೆಗಳು ಮುನ್ನಡಿತವೆ. ಇಂಥ ಒಂದು ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ ವಿಷಯಕ್ಕೆ ನಮಗೆ ನೆರವಾಗಿ ನಿಂತವರು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಸುದೇಶ್ನಾ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅವರು. ಸುದೇಶ್ನಾ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅವರ ಒಡನಾಟ ನಾನು ಬಹಳ ದಿನಗಳಿಂದ ಅವರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ NEP ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನವನ್ನ NEP ಅಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಸಿಲೆಬಸ್ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಟ್ಟು ಒಂದು ರೆಲಿವೆಂಟ್ ಆದ ಒಂದು ಪಠ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ರೂಪಿಸಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗಲೆಲ್ಲ ಅವರು ನಮಗೆ ಸದಸ್ಯರಾಗಿ ಸಿಕ್ಕು ಮಾಮೂಲಿ ನಾವು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ಕೇಂದ್ರವನ್ನು ನಡೆಸ್ತಾ ಇರುವಾಗಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಅವರ ಸೇವೆ ಅನನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ನಡೀತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವರು ವಿಶೇಷವಾದ ಅವರ ಕಾಣಿಕೆ ನನಗೆ ಮನವರಿಕೆ ಬಂದಿದ್ದು ಯಾವುದು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಈ NEP ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಅತ್ಯಂತ ನಿಷ್ಪ್ರಭವಾಗಿ ಅವರು ಸೇವೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿರೋದು ಮತ್ತು ಅವರು ರೆಲಿವೆಂಟ್ ಆದ ಎಲ್ಲ ಜ್ಞಾನ ವಿಚಾರಧಾರೆಗಳನ್ನ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಅವರು ಸೇರಿಸ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿರೋದು. ಇದು ಆ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನದ ಆಸಕ್ತರಿಗೆ ಅವರು ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿವಸ ಈ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳ ಕೆಲವು ಆಯಾಮಗಳನ್ನ ತಮ್ಮ ಮುಂದೆ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಳ್ಳಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇಂತಹ ಕಾರಣಗಳಿಗಾಗಿ ಅವರು ನಮಗೆ ಈ ದಿನ ಒಪ್ಕೊಂಡು ಈ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸವನ್ನ ಆನ್ಲೈನ್ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸವನ್ನು ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಂಡು ಒಪ್ಪಿಕೊಂಡಿರುವ ಕಾರಣಗಳಿಗಾಗಿ ಅವರನ್ನ ನಾನು ಕೃತಜ್ಞತಾ ಪೂರ್ವಕವಾದ ಸ್ವಾಗತವನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಅವರ ಪರಿಚಯ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ಅಧ್ಯಾಪಕ ವೃತ್ತಿಯಿಂದ ಆರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿ ಅವರು ಈಗ ಸಹ ಪ್ರಾಧ್ಯಾಪಕರಾಗಿ ಕಾರ್ಯನಿರ್ವಹಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಾಗೇನೆ ಇನ್ನೇ ಕೆಲವೇ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಾಧ್ಯಾಪಕರಾಗಿ ಕೂಡ ಅವರು ಮುಂದುವರಿತಾರೆ. ಅದು ವೃತ್ತಿಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟ ಸಂಗತಿಗಳೇ ಹೊರತು ಅವರ ಜ್ಞಾನಕ್ಕೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟ ಮಾತಲ್ಲ ಇದು. ಅವರು ನಿರಂತರವಾಗಿ ಹಾಗೆ ನಡೆದ್ರೆ ಯಾವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಪ್ರಾಧ್ಯಾಪಕರಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅವರು ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ವಿದ್ವತ್ತಿನ ವಲಯದ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಯಾವುದೇ ನಿರ್ಬಿಡೆ ಇಲ್ದೇನೆ ಬಹಳ ಸರಳವಾಗಿ ಮತ್ತು ಖಚಿತವಾಗಿ ಮಂಡಿಸುವ ಕೆಲವೇ ಮಹಿಳಾಧ್ಯಯನ ಸಂಶೋಧಕರಲ್ಲಿ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಸುದೇಶ್ನಾ ಮುಖರ್ಜಿ ಅವರು ಒಬ್ರು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಗಮನಿಸಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಅನೇಕ PhD ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಮಾರ್ಗದರ್ಶನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಅವರ ಅನೇಕ ಯೋಜನೆಗಳಿಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಂಗೆ ಅವರು ಕಾರ್ಯನಿರ್ವಹಿಸ್ತಾ UGCಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಿರಲಿ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಅನೇಕ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳಿಗೆ ಅವರು ಮುಖಾಮುಖಿಯಾಗಿ ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಇದ್ದುಕೊಂಡು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಕೂಡ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ವಲಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಅವರು ಸಹಾಯ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅನೇಕ ಯೋಜನೆಗಳು ಮಹಿಳಾ ಪರವಾದ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳು ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅನೇಕ ಈ ತರದ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಒಡನಾಟ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಾಗಲ್ದೇನೆ ಅವರು UGCಯ ಕೆಲವು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಸುದೀರ್ಘವಾದ ಬಯೋಡೇಟಾ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಾನೊಂದು ಅರ್ಧ ಗಂಟೆ ಆದ್ರೂ ಅವ್ರ ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ನಮಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಈ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಕೇಳುಗರ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮಾತ್ರ ಸಮ್ಮಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ನಾನು ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೇನೆ. ಹೀಗೆ ಸಂಶೋಧನಾ ವಲಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೋಧನಾ ವಲಯದ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಅಲ್ಲದೇನೆ ಸರ್ಕಾರಿ ವಲಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಂಘ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳ NGOಗಳಿಗೂ ಮತ್ತು ಸರ್ಕಾರೇತರ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟೀಸ್ ಗಳಿಗೆ ಕೂಡ ಅವರು ಸಹಾಯ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳನ್ನ ರೆಲೆವೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಮುಂದುವರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಈ ದಿನ ನಮಗೆ ಕನ್ನಡ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ವಿಭಾಗ ನಡೆಸ್ತಾ ಇರುವ ಈ ಆನ್ಲೈನ್ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸ ಸರಣಿ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ವಸಾಹತೋತ್ತರ ಚಿಂತನೆಯ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಚಿಂತನೆಯ ಕೆಲವು ಒಳನೋಟಗಳನ್ನ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂಶೋಧಕರಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿವಸ ಜಾಯಿನ್ ಆಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಂಶೋಧಕರಿಗೆ ಕೂಡ ಸಿಗ್ಲಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ಆಶಯವಾಗಿದೆ. ಇಂಥ ಆಶಯಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾರಣಕರ್ತರಾಗಿರೋ ಅವರನ್ನು ಇನ್ನೊಮ್ಮೆ ಸ್ವಾಗತವನ್ನು ಕೋರಿ ಅವರು ತಮ್ಮ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸವನ್ನು ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಅವರನ್ನು ಕೋರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ನಮಸ್ತೆ ಮೇಡಮ್.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸರ್. ಶಿವಾನಂದ್ ಸರ್, ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಗಿವನ್ ಸಚ್ ಅ ವಂಡರ್ಫುಲ್ ಇಂಟ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್. So I sincerely express my gratitude to the Shivanand sir and the Women Studies Center and the Kannada University Hampi. So ನನಗೆ ಈ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು ಸರ್. Then I start my topic. So this is basically today I am supposed to talk on the post-colonial feminism. But before going into that, we must understand that how we where we locate this post-colonial feminism in the feminist movement. Samanyavagi, being a students of women studies, you all know that we understand the women's movement or feminist movement in terms of waves. So we have the first wave feminism, we have second wave, third wave, and now we are talking about the fourth wave feminism also. So we see that when we look at the first wave feminism, we see first wave feminism ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳು, ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕ ಅಸಮಾನತೆಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರು. So we see that whatever the issues came, like women's suffrage, property rights, political rights, or right to education, this kind of. So we thought that the inequality ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ it is coming from the social inequalities, and we tried to, the feminist emphasis was on that. And another important thing is that both first wave and second wave, we see that the feminists, they tried to give the universal solution. So like liberal feminists, for example, you see that this right to vote, right to education. They thought that this will solve everybody's problem. Then when we moved to the second wave feminism in 1960s onwards, mostly in terms of radical feminism, Marxist feminism, or socialist feminism, we see that we shifted from the social and legal arena to, we thought that female body is the site of oppression. So we address the gender-based violence, we talk about rape, we talk about pornography. So, and the mostly we shifted our attention to the patriarchy, that we thought that patriarchy is the main cause. Again, we thought that it is a universal cause. Universally, patriarchy is responsible for the woman's problem, and moment we come out of the patriarchy, it can solve all women's problem equally all over the world. But when we come to the third wave feminism, that where we locate or trace that today's lecture, that third world feminism or post-colonial feminism or postmodern feminism. So there we see that our emphasis move from that universal to particular. Now we talk about that feminist standpoint, that we are talking about that how the global feminist movement, which was dominated by the Western feminism, was completely failed to address the need or the issues which are pertaining to the woman in the global south. That is mostly the woman living in the third world countries. And third world countries, that is women who are living in the Asia, Africa, Latin America, they had the history of colonizations. So here, our takeoff point is here, that we have to understand that universal approach which that first and second wave feminism took, now we have shifted from that universal approach to the pluralistic, particularistic approach. So again, when we move into the next slide, we see that before going into the post-colonial feminism, we have to understand what is colonialism and what is post-colonialism. So I'm sure that all of us are, being a Indian citizen, we are very aware of what is colonialism, but in a very short, that colonialism refers to the policy of having colonies to keep them dependent on the colonizers, so that colonized nations may be used and exploited as material and economic resources by the colonial power. So we can see that bada sulavagi we know that hege the raw materials, we had to sell them in a very cheap prices, and our kare we had to, the complete material we had to price in the double the prices. So both way we were exploited in terms of our raw materials, in terms of our purchasing the finished product. So they used us, all the colonies all over the world, they were used mostly as a market for the industrialized developed countries of the global north. It was also refers to the traits of the colonial life. So the impact of colonialism we see mostly in the field of like how our territory is appropriated, like our geographic territory. We know that ಅವರು ಹೇಗೆ ಒಂದು businessman ಆಗಿ ಬಂದಿದ್ರು, but finally they became the ruler. Then we see that the institutionalization of racism. So how we in our own country, we were given the secondary citizen status. And you see that there were the British clubs where they used to write like that Indians and dogs are not allowed. So like they treated us like dog in our own country. And then the oppression of the oppressed. So this is also, whenever the colonizers came, the ruling was not that easy without collaborating with the local dominant elites. So what happened that when they collaborated with the local elites, there was an internal hierarchy, internal oppression. So those who were oppressed, you can say that women, tribal, Dalits, so they were further oppressed because they were oppressed in the regime, and the regime collaborated with the colonizers, so they became further oppressed. And then we have the destruction of the civilization. So we see that how our agriculture destroyed, we see how our indigenous industries destroyed. You can remember that muslin weavers of Bengal, they had to cut off, their fingers were chopped off so that they cannot prepare the finer qualities of the muslin, which can give a competition to the Manchester made the clothings. So you see that, I mean, even you think that all our, I mean, the British Museum is a better place to study Indian history than the Indian museums, because all our artifacts, all our histories were shifted there. So we see that the destruction of the civilization, the culture, that is, these are the, I mean, manifold approach of the colonizations. Then what the post-colonization, post-colonialism talks about in comparison to colonialism, post-colonialism is a discourse of the colonizers, colonized or the oppressed. So post-colonialism try to see the world from the perspective of the colonized. Since there is an ongoing interrogation and knowledge addition within this discursive realm, it does not end with departure from the colonizers. So we see that first there is a literal descriptions of the conditions in the former colonial societies. What post-colonialism trying to do? They try to describe the conditions during the colonial time. So we have seen the number of write-ups, because we must understand this post-colonial studies are mostly occurred in the discursive realms of the literature and history. So we have seen a number of write-ups coming up about describing the situations, reinventing, re-looking at history. Secondly, there is a description of the global conditions after the independence of these colonies and the forms of new colonialism. So don't think that colonization is over. So the countries after gaining independence also, there were various further means of colonizing them again, because colonizer never wanted to end their control and the benefits which they were getting out of this country. So then again these countries were markets. So then again you see that in the name of development, in the name of economy, how the further colonization happened. And thirdly, this post-colonial studies try to describe these conditions, how this can be, I mean, as a discipline, as a branch of knowledge, this can be presented. So having its own methodology, having its own way of representation. So post-colonialism talks about that. So when we come to the post-colonial feminism, you see that it deals with a plethora of issues. So it deals with the country itself, its culture, history, then the process of double colonization. Then now when the colonizers left you, but you are left to fend yourselves, then operation from the colonization and the patriarchy together. So there is a plethora of things which we will be discussing. So, and you must understand that from this picture that how these all issues are interconnected. These are the very, very interconnected issues. So that intersectional inequality is very, very much, presented here. Then we have that when we look at the post-colonial feminism, we see that post-colonial feminism finds a parallel between colonization and the subjugation of the woman. So these goes parallelly, this goes in hand. The Western feminists, we have seen that in their write-up in both the first wave and the second wave of feminism, we have seen that they have a narrow focus on the general belief that all women are equal, all women, they undergo similar kind of an oppressions, and their problem can be solved in a similar fashion with similar solutions. So, but imperial colonizations was associated with the belief that Westerners are superior and colonizers are inferior. Therefore, it is a civilizational responsibility of the colonies. So they forgot that our civilization is much more older, much more traditional. Our economy, 300 years back when Britishers came as a businessman, that time our economy, our GDP was highest in the world. If you look in this Shashi Tharoor's latest book, that is very, very interestingly talking about how economically prosperous we are. Not only us, even Africa, it was also an economically prosperous country, culturally rich. We had a rich tradition, history, and everything was, vanquished. And we are portrayed that we are inferior, we have no civilizations. They have come and they are doing us a favor by bringing us out of our problem. So they never talked about what they were getting from us. So these were generally based on the universalization of Western women's experience, and they wanted their voices to be heard. Post-colonialism feminism, it developed as a critique of both colonialism and also uh, the gender-based marginalization of women in the early feminism. So, post-colonial feminism, you see that it addresses both gender-based marginalization of the woman in the developed societies and also the marginalization of women in the colonies. So, post-colonialism feminism, we can see that it addressed a plethora of issues. So we have to understand it is not only talking about the gender subjugation. Gender subjugation, again, we have to understand in terms of, because post-colonialism only brought the issue of intersectionality, where we are understanding issues in terms of their interconnectedness. So a woman is oppressed, but a poor Dalit woman under a colonial regime is more oppressed. A tribal woman who is having some physical disability are more challenged. So because these are different axes of inequality, when they are crossing each other, their conditions are become even more problematic. So you see, they talked about not only the gender issues, they're trying to, this post-colonial feminist studies, they're trying to understand gender issues in terms of migration, because you can see that this colonial time, there was a significant migration happened. Even you can see that a good number of Indians, they were taken as a indentured labor in the Latin America or in the other Asian countries and African countries. They faced abominable conditions. They were highly oppressed. And we all know the history of slavery, how the slaves from Africa, they were taken to the America and other European countries. So we cannot understand the conditions of the woman without understanding this histories of migration, slavery, the issues of representation, suppression, and resistance. So we cannot understand gender in a very simplistic term. It is not a one-way understanding. So you understand the issues of, you understand the challenges of a woman in a colonized country, but you think about the woman migrants from a colonized country to another country where the culture, climate, nothing she knows. But she was forced to go to the other country because as a part of the, colonized operation. So the post-colonial feminism arose out of the third wave of feminism, and it shares its concept with the intersectionality as we talked about. So now we will see that there are various concepts which are very, very dominant. In this short span of time, I just identified some key concepts which helps you in which will help you in understanding the postmodern feminism better, post-colonial feminism better. So you see that one thing is that parallelism and intersectionality. So you can see that this colonized, operation and patriarchal operation, it goes parallelly in a colonized society. And they intersect also with each other. They run parallelly and they also intersect with each other. Post-colonial feminism emphasizes this interconnectedness of the various forms of oppression, the gender, race, caste, class, sexuality, so many things. So these all shapes the, you see that Kimberly Crenshaw's writing, how she developed this perspective of intersectionality, but many of the post-colonial writers, be it Bell Hooks, though Bell Hooks mostly a Black feminist writer, but she has a significant contributions, and she was pioneer to this intersectional thinking, that how this colonizations, they had a different multiple axes in controlling the or oppressing the woman's life where they were functional. Then there is a question of colonial legacy. Post-colonial feminists analyzes the enduring effect of colonization or colonialism on the women's lives in colonial regions. They examine that how colonial power imposed patriarchal structures, stereotypes, and cultural norms often leading to the marginalization of women. In this context, in our country, the very good example is the revival of Manusmriti. When Britishers were codifying that Indian Penal Code, so obviously they were not very aware of the Indian conditions. They took help of the Brahminical patriarchy to codify. So we must understand that Manusmriti is not the only Smriti available in the Indian legal traditions. We have Yagyavalka Shriti, we have Katyayana Shriti, especially in South India, you see that number of very, very progressive Smritis were there, and local life was guided by those Smritis, which gave more, you can see that better positions to the women. They treated men, women more equally in terms of property. So Manusmriti was just the one of the Smritis, but it became the Manusmriti because again the colonizers liked it. So colonizers took help of the local, you can see that established patriarchy, which was a Brahminical patriarchy, the priest, the Maulavis, they took help of them because they never had that much of a contact with the common intelligentsia or the common people. So they made Manusmriti applicable to the entire India. So that has become the law, and our existing laws were guided by that. Then you can see that the third thing is this essentialism or the cultural relativism. Post-colonial feminism challenges the essentialist view that depict women in colonized societies as universally oppressed passive victim. So this passivity, ಅವರು ಪಾಪ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಏನು ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗಲ್ವಾ, ನಾನೆಲ್ಲ ಬರಬೇಕು ಅವರಿಗೆ ಉದ್ಧಾರ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ. So the condition was not like that. We had the history of powerful women. Even we see that many women, they fought against the Britishers themselves. We have this Rani Channamma, we have this Jhansi Rani. There are a number of such women who locally, they were very powerful. So we even have a customs that why this Channamma or Lakshmi Bai they fought against. Then again, that how the Britishers, they denounced our tradition of this Dattu Magadu tradition. So they said if the king dies without children, the dynasty will be, the kingdom will be attached to the Britishers. So the severe disregard of our local traditions. So you can see that these were, always they get pleasure in showing the the people from the colonies as the passive victim and the oppressed. According to post-colonial feminists like Chandra Mahanti, mainstream Western feminism represents the other woman as a composite, singular, third world woman. Western feminism, they totally refuse to recognize the heterogeneity. There is a difference between American woman and an African woman and an Indian woman. An Indian woman is also not a homogeneous category. We are women in terms of upper caste woman, in terms of Dalit woman, in terms of rich woman, poor woman, Hindu woman, Muslim woman. So among the Hindus, there are Shaivite women, Vaishnavite women, there are Buddhist women, there are Sikh women. So there are number of differences. Woman is not at all a homogeneous category. So this post-colonial, post-modern feminism, they talk about this plurality of womanhood. Unless and until you recognize this plurality, unless and until you recognize this heterogeneity, it is very difficult to solve their problems, because the most of the problems, most of the oppressions are culturally and locally rooted. So if you don't recognize the challenges, then how can you think about solving the problem? So we never existed before the colonial ruler the way we are. They had a picture in their mind and they painted us in the way they wanted to paint us. Then there is an Eurocentrism. That is also one of the challenges, that post-colonial feminists, they critique that Eurocentric perspective of the mainstream feminism that tends to impose the Western norms and values to the non-Western cultures. So in this respect, I can tell you that a very beautiful example, actually this was raised by one of my students, a first semester student long back in the class. So I was teaching them that right to work, that liberal feminisms they talk about. Then he very nicely asked that, ma'am, what is right to work? I am the mother of a single child of a single mother. Nan tai kelsa madlebeku. Yavaru avrige kelasadu adhikara kododu avashyakta ilva. So you see, for a poor woman, right to work is a fancy thinking from the middle class, upper caste woman who has got other securities, and then they think about right to work. But think about the poor woman, they right, baduglike avaru kelsa madlebeku. Without the right to work, they or their children will not leave. So nobody needs to give them that rights. Though had that rights, they have been doing this. So, but you see that these aspect of that woman's liberation of the woman from the third world countries, that has completely ignored by the, first world feminists. They always think problems in terms of their perspective. Then again, another very interesting things come, that critiquing the development paradigm. Because this was development was another neo-colonial methods. So this is the way the developmental aid, they tried to again the because when the colonizers left all these third world countries in a very, very poor conditions, they needed the help and support to even make their people live alive. So this developmental aid concept came. So these developed countries, erstwhile colonizers, they started extending their support hand. But that had some hidden clause. Always developmental aids come with the hidden clause. That ಆಯ್ತಾ ನಾನು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಸಹಾಯತ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ, ಬಟ್ ನೀವು ನನಗೆ ಆ ಐರನ್ ರೋಡ್ ಇಷ್ಟೇ ಪ್ರೈಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು, ನೀವು ನನಗೆ ಪೆಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಇದೇ ಪ್ರೈಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು. So it has come with its own challenges. But when this developmental paradigms also came, they came with their own models. They tried to, like those who, you all studied the various models, approaches to women and development, right from women and development to the gender and development or empowerment approach. You see that how many different discourses we have crossed. And many a time we found that failures of the, non-gender inclusive developments are what? That development mostly prioritize the practical gender need over the strategic gender need. They only try to make the woman's life little better, little comfortable, but they never want to question the existing power relationship. They never want to reverse the power relationship. So these are the challenges of the development mechanisms, development models which have come from the West. So many a time, like you see that in a vegetarian community, they go and they will say that to become very healthy, you have to have a non-vegetarian food. So if that is your for aragya care, that is your solution, that is not going to work. I'm just giving you a small example. So this often happened. Then they say that these people are very backward. Avru sariyagi ಊಟನ ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ. So you cannot invade somebody's cultural belief, religious practices. There are other ways to address the nutritional deficiency of that community, but you are failing to do that because you look into things that naan yen ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದೀನಿ ಅದು ನಿಜ, ಅದು ಸರಿ, ನಿಮ್ದು ಎಲ್ಲ ತಪ್ಪು. So this is the problem, and most of the reasons of our development failure is also that. Then also it talks about, this is mostly this hybridity and identity concept has come from the Chandra Mahanti, because we see that we created this close interaction with the colonial culture and the local culture that led to the generation of a hybrid mixed culture. So you can see that where the interaction was more close, this hybridity was more prominent. You can see that this Goa culture. So that's a very different from the local culture, because that Portuguese influence that created a very different culture there. So otherwise, in many part of the India, they were insulated from this hybridity because Britishers maintained a distance. But you see that this prominent, like one of the great example is that now that problem which we are having, that I am not so comfortable with your language, because again, that is this language. Again, this is an impact of hybridity. Britishers created English as a common language for the entire India. So English is a bone or also is a bend. So this problem that English grow at the cost of the local languages. So this was one of the example of the hybrid culture. Then we have this issue of double colonization. Double colonization, it is a concept developed by Holmes Peterson and the Rutherford. It is talking about that how women were oppressed by both patriarchy and the imperial colonial power. So you can think about the colonial men, women, both of them were oppressed, but women were further oppressed by virtue of their gender. So you can see that rape as a mechanism was very greatly used on women. So you can think about there is a woman freedom fighter. So you know that for her, her breasts were chopped. So these kind of, I mean, in the cellular jail of Andaman, that was the way she was tortured. So when you see that what is happening in the Manipur, the same thing happened during the colonial time also. So Manipur, when otherwise oppression is happening, female bodies are further oppressed. So here also the colonial time, the women, they had the further oppression because of their by virtue of their their feminine gender. So you can see that this is what the post-colonial feminists, they termed as a double colonization. Then there is a concept of the global sisterhood, that this post-colonial, though they feminists, though they contested the concept of universal sisterhood. Excuse me. Please stop talking. So when we look at the global sisterhood concept, that postmodern feminists say that yes, they don't believe in the universal sisterhood, but because it don't recognize the you can see that the heterogeneity of the woman, but still the coalition, I mean the coalition between the women from the global north and global south is required to defeat patriarchy, to defeat misogyny. So it cannot be done in isolation. So first we have to recognize our diversity. We have to recognize our particular issue. At the same time, we have to connect. As a woman, globally, we have to connect to championing the women's causes. Then this margin to center, this is a famous concept by the bell hooks. So it highlights, by now we know that how post-colonial feminism emphasizes the dominance of Western ways of, they challenges that dominance of Western ways of knowledge. Like Gayatri Spivak, John Sharp, they also argues that white Western ways of knowing are accepted as the single voice of authenticity. Other forms of knowing are marginalized by Western thinkers. And since they are often, our knowledge system, these are relegated to the field of myths or folklores like that. So their knowledge system is the system. Their way of knowing truth is the way of knowing truth. And our systems are just these are the folklores or myths. So post-colonial theorists have challenged this Western ways of knowing and writing. This single voiced authority, there cannot be a single way of knowing. There cannot be one single God. There are multiplicity of, there are multiple gods. So there are multiple ways of knowing. There are multiple truths. There cannot be one single truth. So these single unilinear model is, which is often, even we consider this as a very patriarchal way of understanding. So that is being criticized very severely by the feminists. Post-colonial feminists, and they preferred that multiple sources of the truth, multiple sources of the knowledge. And in this process, they suggested that decolonization. So the colonization has already happened. Now we have to, how to come out of this, how to come out of this particular way of thinking, this monolithic way of thinking. That's the process of decolonization. So decolonization requires in various fields. It is not only the one, it is not only the political decolonization we are talking about. Political decolonization is already aage there. We got independence more than 75 years back. But now we are talking about decolonization in the other field, like culture, like politics, so like our knowledge system. So like you now see that UGC also, like under NEP, now we are trying to emphasize that Indianization of our knowledge system. That we are also a very rich civilization. We have also a very rich historical, philosophical traditions. So those are not just the myths and folklores. They are the philosophical thought. And we have to explore that. We have to popularize that because they were all buried under the dominant system. They were all they are given a nice burial. And now we have to we have to understand, we have to deconstruct. So you can see that this postmodernism, post-colonialism, ಅವರು ಈ ವರ್ಡ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿವಾಗಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, that deconstruct. Don't trust, don't believe what you see. You have to break that barrier and you have to go beyond and you have to understand the deeper meaning. Then now we will see that who are these are the basic fundamental concept. Now I will just briefly touch upon some of the famous post-colonial thinkers. One of the most prominent post-colonial thinker is the Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak. She was famous for her essay that Can Subaltern Speak? This has been a foundational text in the post-colonial and the feminist studies. So as post-colonial feminist, Spivak work is, characterized by critiquing and deconstructing the oppressive structures and legacies of colonialism. She talked about that the voices and perspectives of the marginalized groups, particularly the women in global South, have been historically silenced and excluded from the dominant discourses. So that subaltern voice, especially the voice of the woman as a subaltern, have we ever heard? So Spivak, in her famous essay that Can Subaltern Speak, examines the predicament of subaltern or marginalized women and challenge they face in gaining the visibility and agency within the post-colonial societies. So it is so very difficult, even in the post-colonial societies also, women whose voices were dumped. So like you can see that this our traditional medicine. So we have a very rich tradition of that. And many women are also the practitioners of the traditional medicines. But now we put them and the quack in the same category. We are totally ignoring their knowledge. We are totally ignoring the scientific basis of their knowledge. We are thinking that these are these, that. So we don't consider these as an alternative knowledge system. So because we are trained, we are told for centuries to react to our own system in that fashion. So you can see that the Spivak advocate for the importance of giving voice to the subaltern and the marginalized group. She deals with the issues of representation, cultural differences, and the risk of appropriation. So when we are trying to appropriate something, then there are certain risks incurred. So this led to the discussions and debates on the ethics of representations and speaking of others within the academic and the activist circle. Overall, Spivak's work as a post-colonial feminist has been crucial in advancing critical perspective in the colonial feminism and the need for more inclusive and intersectional approaches in the social and cultural analysis. Then we have this Homi Bhabha. Homi K. Bhabha agrees with the Spivak, and his article was titled, his famous essay was titled Subaltern Can Speak. So he justifies himself by stressing on the degenerating nature of the native population. So he asserted that women, especially as a subaltern group, they can speak, and that a native woman's voice can be recovered and is recovered in the readings of the colonial texts and the discourses. So we see that the existence of the post-colonial discourse is an example of post-colonial speaking, and in most cases, dominant language is appropriated and is used for representations. So, I mean, we can see that like this recovery of the subaltern voices. So yes, women, they may never wrote, But you can see that in the local functions, the songs women sing. So there are the woman voices are inherent in this local songs. I think our Shailaja ma'am, she does a lot of these kind of recoveries in terms of this folk culture. So these are buried, these are there buried in the folk culture. So even in Bengal, I have seen that there are a lot of unknown, non-descriptive women. They were never famous women, but they have wrote something about themselves. They have wrote something about their life. Those were not a great literature, but that gives you a greater understanding of the society that time. So those kind of write-ups are, it's nothing but a personal diary, but those were recovered and those were published. So you can get the perspective of woman, because history is always his story. She never, I mean, exists there. So we never have a, I mean, you can say that institutional woman voice. So we have to source, I mean, we have to source our resources from this, you can say that, I mean, unknown areas. So that way you can see that this feminist methodology talks about a very innovative ways of collecting data. This oral history, this case studies, or you can see that this feminist historiography per se, it is very innovative, it is very challenging. So Homi Bhabha talks about these kind of perspective, that recovering experiences of those who are hitherto hidden from the history. So it is not only women, even you can see that the voices of the Dalit, the voices of the tribal groups. So we have to, because there was no official efforts made to hear their voices. So we have to make the unconventional ways to hear them. Then we have the bell hooks. Bell hooks was more popular as a Black feminist thinkers, but she was one of her perspective that she also challenged that Western feminist domination and marginalization of the Black voices under the Western feminist tradition, which consider that universalistic feminist voice. So bell hooks question that. She uses a pluralistic lens to recognize the absence of oppressed groups and the interrogation of cultural representations. Even before intersectionality became the buzzword with the Kimberly Crenshaw and all in the 1990s, much before that, bell hook used this intersectional interlocking webs of oppression to develop her concepts. Bell hook observed that so-called second wave of feminism of the mid to late 20th century had emerged from women in a position of privilege and did not represent the African woman, American woman. So she used basically the two tools, that post-colonial feminist theory and post-colonial feminist criticisms. Besides, who keeps carrying the practice of post-colonial feminist criticism, she focuses on the wrong images of the third world woman in the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy that I have been talking you, that this papa look, that aurige they are tumba suppressed, aurige yenu madake agalla, they are illiterate, they are uncultured, they are just a victim. So they have their own agencies. The Hook's post-colonial feminism not only supplement the theory of both post-colonialism and feminism, but also can help women of the third world to get rid of all kinds of oppression and the construct their, that has constructed their subjectivity and to develop their own agencies. So she was a prolific voice and very interesting to read. Then we have another Indian voice, that is Chandra Mahanti. Her famous essay is Under the Western Eyes, Feminist Scholarship and the Colonial Discourse. She talked about the diverse representational discourse. Western feminist writings have colonized the material and historical heterogeneities. So that heterogeneity ilva. So it's like a very, their representation of womanhood as a very homogeneous way. So you can see that that third world woman, like you can see the very example of how, this women were not just a hapless woman, they're very passive, they need somebody to come and bring them out of their uncivilized conditions. You see that how the very common woman, they took part in the civil, our freedom struggle, India's freedom struggle movement. So you can see that they took part in the terrorist kind of a movement where they never thought twice to hold the gun, or they took part in the Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's army. They took part in the Asahajag movement of the Mahatma Gandhi. So they were there. They were not just sitting at the home. They were not just waiting for somebody to come and bring them out of their conditions. They were actively participating. They actively participated in the Constituent Assembly to give all of us a very equal constitution. Our constitution is one of the very equal constitution. So these are all very active role of the woman. If you see that this entire discourse of the political rights of women in India, you see that how actively women participated in the process. They were not just the victim of the situation. So even not only this political discourse, also you can say that legal discourse. If you see that how the evolution of our rape laws happen, you see the Mathura case, you see the Bhavri Devi case or the Vishakha judgment, or you see the Nirbhaya case. So it was the participation of the common woman which helped in, directing the laws to a new channel. And we see that how discourses on rape has changed, the legal discourses on rape. So in some, Chandravanti strikes a blow at the monolithic generalized representation of the third world woman. In particular, she warns against the freezing the woman in time, space, and history. So it is not a freezing concept. You have to liberate, you have to understand her in her own cultural context. So she deconstructs the notion of a universalized sisterhood by documenting the experiences by women of color in different societies, including the dual system of discrimination articulated by the male and female patriarchy. Now, I just see that what are the, we have discussed a very, this is a very short time that I just tried to focus upon the main aspects of the post-colonial feminism. Now we will see that what are the, dominant criticisms of, any perspective cannot go without criticism. So from the criticism, a new perspective comes forward. So we see that intersectionality, which is the asset for this, intersectionality, again, a liability, because intersectionality is an extremely complex and diverse concept to understand and use as a tool. So this is obviously an advantage of the post-colonial feminism. At the same time, it is a liability if we want to use this as a only way to understand the situation. Then cultural relativism versus universal right. Post-colonial feminism navigates between a very delicate balance, that respecting cultural diversity and challenging the harmful practices that may be justified on cultural and traditional grounds. So now you can see that this, now we are the same debate now we are undergoing in the national domain, that uniform civil code. So whether we need that uniform rules to dominate us, or whether we want the particularistic ideas. So sometimes the post-colonial feminism, when they talk about this particularism, when it is championing this particularism or respecting the local culture, sometimes we see that local culture is extremely harmful to the woman. So if we are supporting Indian tradition, that doesn't mean we want to revive back sati. We want the child marriage to continue, which is not that. So harmful cultural practices must go. So there are certain universal goals, there are certain universally accepted values, so which cannot be questioned. It is not that when we are championing or when we are talking about the cultural, diversity, we should support those kind of harmful practices. And mostly, culture is a field. In the name of culture, the women's rights are maximum jeopardized. So we have to be aware about that. We have to maintain a very delicate balance. Then decolonizing the feminist theory. This is one of the most important aspects, that post-colonial feminism aims to decolonize feminist theories and knowledge production Historically, that feminist theories we have discussed again and again, that how Eurocentric it is. Simple thing, you can see that Western feminism values individuality. It talks about individual rights. So Western feminism will think that a mother who has been deserted by the partner, having 4 or 5 children and managing alone, is a very hapless woman. They may consider that she's a stupid woman. Her knowledge is very poor. That's why she's suffering. She should have given, if you are thinking in terms of individual rights, she should have given all the children to the state support, state custody, and she could have lived comfortably. But an Indian mother or an African mother think her power in terms of her children. She is happy. She gets, that is a multiple sources of happiness. In the capability approach Amartya Sen talked about, that happiness don't come from one particular way. I am comfortable. I am living comfortably. Our Indian way of thinking don't make you happy just by you are comfortable, you are happy, because don't get happiness in terms of individual pursuit. You think about in terms of the collective spirit. So that the motherhood is viewed very differently here than the Western perspective of motherhood. So there is nothing good and bad about it, which is good, which is bad. We are different, and goodness lies in accepting the difference, acknowledging the differences. So these decolonizations are very, very, very much needed in the feminist theoretical realm. Then neo-colonial influences. So the colonizers gone, independence achieved. That does not mean that colonization as a process is obliterated. So we have this economic dependency, political manipulations in a globalized world, that neo-colonization takes a multiple route. The war is happening in Ukraine and the prices are rising in the entire global south. The poorer countries are not getting their food grains. Oil prices are increasing. So you see how connected we are. So it is not that colonization ended and things ended. So we have to keep our eyes and ears open about this new colonization techniques. So it may not be only in the field of economics, in the cultural fields. So now you see that all the new age, the alpha generation, so they maybe the Bengali, Punjabi, Kannada or Telugu, instead of their khichdi, their samosa or their idli dosa, all of them like the pizza and burger. So that cultural encroachments are happening. Through these OTT channels, we are exposed to diverse cultural aspects. Now I see that a group of young girls, they are more comfortable in the Korean language. The Korean K-pop is a very popular. So youngsters are watching Korean serial, Korean movies, eating Korean food, speaking Korean language. So you see that cultural innovation come from any route. You don't need formally a colonizers to come and invade your country and take you. So now that chances are much more easier and diverse. So we have to be very aware of these things. Then access to education and resources. Women in post-colonial societies, because of their abysmal poverty and underdevelopment, they may face limited access to education and resources. So these are hindering their abilities to engage in feminist activism and challenging the traditional gender role. So this is also responsibility of us to sensitize them, making the educational tool and the gender sensitive knowledge accessible to them. So these are very important. Then this patriarchal resistance. This is patriarchal misogynist resistance is I call the patriarchy is a more virulent virus than the COVID, because it can change and mutate. Prati kshetradalli, prati deshadalli, prati kshanadalli, that virus is mutating itself and it is coming in a new avatar. So each situation giving rise to a newer kind of patriarchy. So we have to be aware of that and we have to resist that. Then language barriers and translation. So this is also like, now we have some kind of a barrier because I am unfortunately using that colonizers language because India being a diverse language country. So we, as a connecting language, they have popularized English. We could have done with some Indian languages. So these are the challenges. These can be challenges. I mean, each of the issue I am discussing here in the challenges, that can be an asset, that can be a liability both. So that English speaking given us an edge in the world scenario. So a good number of Indians are they are going abroad and they are doing wonderful. So from them, the India is getting a good amount of remittances. Our forex reserves are increasing. So there is a both, and you have both positives and negatives for everything. Then you have this media representations and cultural stereotypes, then global solidarity and collaboration. So you have all these different challenges which post-colonial feminism is facing, and more so is that sustainability and the long-term impact, because colonialism was a very long process. It was a 200 years, 25 years also we could not erase that. We need many more years because it has jeopardized our history, culture, economy, mindset, everything. So it is a long-term process. Sustaining feminist movements over time and ensuring lasting can be very challenging, especially when we are facing the multiple resistance in terms of patriarchy from the capitalistic system, from the imperialism. So challenges are many, but this post-colonial feminism gives us very good avenues for understanding our own societies and also giving a voice to the subaltern, challenged, oppressed section of the society. So I'm finishing it here, and now the floor is yours. You can ask me the questions if you want.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Namaste, sir. Raj sir. ಯಾರಾದರೂ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳೇನಾದರೂ ಇದ್ರೆ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. 15 ನಿಮಿಷದಲ್ಲಿ ಚರ್ಚೆಯನ್ನು ಸಮ್ಮಪ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ನಮಸ್ತೆ ಚಲುರಾಜ್ ಸರ್. ನಮಸ್ತೆ
ಸರ್. ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ
ಸರ್. ಯಾರಾದ್ರೂ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿದ್ರೆ ಕೇಳಿ, ಇಲ್ಲಾಂದ್ರೆ ಸಮ್ಮಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ.
ಸುದೇಶ್ನಾ?
Yes, ma'am.
ನಿಮ್ಮ ಇಡೀ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸ ತುಂಬಾ ವ್ಯಾಪಕವಾಗಿ ಅನೇಕ ಏನಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಬಹಳ ಸಂಕೀರ್ಣವಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಅನೇಕ ಸಂಗತಿಗಳನ್ನ ನೀವು ಬಹಳ ಚಾಲೆಂಜಿಂಗ್ ಆಗಿ ಅಳವಡಿಸಿಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರಿ. ಅದು ಅನೇಕ ಇನ್ಸೈಟ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಕೇವಲ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗಲ್ಲ, ಅಧ್ಯಯನಕಾರರಿಗೂ ನಮ್ಮಂತವರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಅನೇಕ ಇನ್ಸೈಟ್ಸ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಅಭಿನಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ನನ್ನ ಸೈಡ್ ನಿಂದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ಇಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಏನಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಆಂಗಲ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗೆ ನೋಡಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಬಿಗಿನಿಂಗ್ ಇಂದ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ತನಕ ಒಂದು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಅವಧಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ಸಮಗ್ರವಾಗಿ ಮತ್ತು ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುವ ಹಾಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಮಂಡಿಸಿದ್ದೀರಿ. ಆ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ನಿಮಗೆ ಅಭಿನಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಮೇಡಮ್.
ಮತ್ತೆ ಯಾರಾದ್ರೂ? ಸಮಪ್ ಮಾಡೋಣ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸಿದೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಸುದೀರ್ಘವಾಗಿ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಸುದೇಶ್ನಾ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅವರು ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾಲೋನಿಸಂ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಮ್ಮ ಫೋಕ್ಲೋರ್ ನಿಂದ ಮತ್ತೆ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರು ಮತ್ತೆ ಕಲ್ಚರು ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಂಗತಿಗಳನ್ನ ಮೇನ್ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಎಲ್ಲ ಚಿಂತಕರನ್ನ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ವಸಾಹತೋತ್ತರ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿವಸ ವಿವಿಧ ಆಯಾಮಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗೆ ಎದುರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ ಮತ್ತು ಜೆಂಡರ್ ಸ್ಟಡೀಸ್ ಕೂಡ ಹೇಗೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡ್ತದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಹೇಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಅಳವಡಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕಾದ ಅಗತ್ಯತೆ ಮತ್ತು ತುರ್ತುಗಳನ್ನು ಕುರಿತು ತುಂಬಾ ಗಂಭೀರವಾಗಿ ತುಂಬಾ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್ ವೈಡ್ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳನ್ನ ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದು ಈ ದಿನ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಮಂಡಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆ ಕಾರಣಗಳಿಗಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಸುದೇಶ್ನಾ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ತುಂಬಾ ಹೃದಯಪೂರ್ವಕವಾದ ವಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಹಾಗೇನೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಈ ದಿನದ ವಿಚಾರ ಸಂಕಿರಣದ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ, ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸದ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಮಾಜ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನಿಕದ ಡೀನ್ರಾದ ಚಲುವರಾಜು ಸರ್ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರಿಗೂ ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂವಾದದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಾಧ್ಯಾಪಕ ಶೈಲಜಾ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಆಸಕ್ತರಾದ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅನೇಕ ಚಿಂತಕರು ಮತ್ತು ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳು ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿದ್ರಿ. ನಿಮಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ವಿಶೇಷವಾದ ವಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷತೆ ವಹಿಸಿಕೊಟ್ಟು ಈ ಚಾಲನೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ನಮ್ಮ ಮಾನ್ಯ ಕುಲಪತಿಗಳಾದ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಡಿ ವಿ ಪರಮಶಿವಮೂರ್ತಿ ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಇದನ್ನ ನಿರಂತರವಾಗಿ ಮುಂದುವರಿಸೋದಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರೇರಣೆ ಮತ್ತು ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹವನ್ನು ನೀಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರ ಪ್ರೇರಣೆ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹ ಹೀಗೆ ನಿರಂತರವಾಗಿ ಮುಂದುವರಿತಿದೆ. ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರನ್ನು ನೆನೆಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅವರಿಗೂ ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ವಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಅಂತಿಮವಾಗಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಎಲ್ರನ್ನೂ ಕೃತಜ್ಞತೆಯನ್ನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತಾ, ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ದರ್ಪಣ ಕೇಂದ್ರದ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ವಿಜೇಂದ್ರ ಸರ್ ಅವರು ಮತ್ತು ಶಕುಂತಲಾ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ನಮಗೆ ಕನೆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಟ್ಟು ಬಹಳ ಸಹಾಯ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನೆನೆಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಇಂದಿನ ತುಂಬಾ ಈ ತರದ ಒಂದು ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ ಬೌದ್ಧಿಕವಾದ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಅಳವಡಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕಾದ ನಮ್ಮ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಮಾರ್ಗದರ್ಶಿಯಾದ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸವನ್ನ ನೆರವೇರಿಸಿಕೊಟ್ಟಿರುವ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಸುದೇಶ್ನಾ ಮುಖರ್ಜಿ ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅವರನ್ನ ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ವಿಶ್ವವಿದ್ಯಾಲಯದ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಮಹಿಳಾ ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ವಿಭಾಗದ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ವಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಸಲ್ಲಿಸಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನ ಮುಕ್ತಾಯ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ನಮಸ್ತೆ ಮೇಡಮ್.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸರ್. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸೋ ಮಚ್ ಸರ್.